Folks, it's a great honor to present to you this quilt of epic proportion as a block of the month. We are doing block number 1. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hello and welcome, friends. My name is Rob Appell from Stitch in Heaven, and it is an incredible honor to present to you this epic block of the month designed by my dear friend Charisma Horton from the Little Pink Barn. This is going to be an incredible 12-month sew-along. When the quilt's all done, it is going to be 96 inches by 96 inches, and I will be presenting one tutorial each and every month, starting right now, so that we can all work on this together. You're going to want to make sure that you already have your pattern purchased and or downloaded and or your kit ready to rock and roll, because we are working from Charisma's pattern. I'm not going to use exact sizes so that I can protect my friend and we can all help support her. This is going to be an awesome project, like I said, and here is the awesome block we are doing, block number 1. And it doesn't have a name, so I'm just going to call it block number 1, the Fun Superstar, and we're going to be working from some templates. We're going to make quarter square triangles and this fun little center unit, and I'm going to walk you through all the steps as we go. And as I'm working through this entire video series, folks, I just want to point out real quick, the fabrics are from Benartex. Thank you, Benartex and Rob Appell, New and Newer Worlds. This wonderful variety of fabrics you're using today. And also on page 2, you have the color chart, and within the color chart here you have all of the names and of the actual fabric, plus the names as referred to throughout the pattern. I also want to show you some of the patterns. The printing gets really close between maybe the blue and the aqua color. So Charisma's already put in these little color keys to help you make sure you're staying color organized. When your quilt is all done, it will actually form this really cool color wheel, the way the different stars play together. And like I said, we're going to have some pretty focused construction and some real fun and wild random construction as we go through. Let me just go ahead and set these pages aside, and we're going to dive right in. I've got lots of the parts and pieces out here, but as I was starting to say, as we're working from the pattern, I'm going to really be working with the color pieces that you see in the diagrams. We'll have often many of other colors to follow, and all that information is going to be written out in the descriptions here as we go through. So our first step is really going to be to draw a diagonal line on the back of our larger squares, right? So I've got my different colors that have been pre-laid out in my cutting instructions. So on the back of these larger squares right now, I'm going to take a ruler that is longer, and I'm using a chalk pencil, and sometimes my chalk pencil gets a little bit dull. So I want you to notice I'm actually marking slightly from the inside. So I'm really getting a line that is tip to tip here, because we're going to use that as our guideline for sewing here in a second. Okay, so we need to do that with all of the pieces required as we're getting ready to start. These are our larger squares here, and we'll be utilizing these pieces to form back together what you can see are these cool quarter square triangle units. Once you have your diagonal on there, you're going to go ahead and just stitch 1/4 inch on both sides. And folks, if you're a chain piecer, this is the time to go ahead and do all of that sewing all at once. I am going to use basically just my foot as my guide, and we're going to be going ahead and trimming these down after we finish to the accurate size so that we can have some really nice precision patchwork if that's what we're going for. But because we're chain piecing, what I'm going to do is all of one side of these to be quarter square triangles. Right now they're looking a lot like half square triangles, if you get the quilter's humor in that. And then let's just say we have all of them to still do, which you all will, but I don't want you to have to wait for me to do all of the fabric, so I'm going to hit my auto thread cutter, which I love, just love. Okay, I'm going to rotate them around, making sure that I'm looking at them just the same I was as before, but now I'm on the other side there of that line, and I'm just going to go ahead and now chain piece all of these as well. Once all of those larger square units have been chain pieced, and folks, I should have pointed out, part of what we're doing here, even though you can probably see we're using matching colors right now of the greens, is we're using different colors of our background. This blue is really our #1 background color that you're going to see throughout the quilt if it wasn't bigger than the set itself. And you're going to see that there, like I said, is that common fabric, and we'll be utilizing these in a minute to put the rest of the block together, as you can see in some of these other locations, right? So at any rate, now this blue and these greens are all going to form like you see with these two oranges, these reds, and that same blue. So that's what I should have pointed out before we got started. Nonetheless, all of the sewing is done. So I'm going to protect my hand, be a wise teacher, lay that right there on that chalk line now, and we're going to go ahead and cut those seam allowances. I'm going to make sure my iron is nice and warm. It's okay. Now what we're going to want to do is we're going to take all of these and we're just going to press them. Now let me remind myself, I did some of the prep work in a while ago, and it doesn't necessarily say which side to press on. So at this point, let's just press to the green side so we're being consistent, or press to your consistent fabric color side. It's so much fun to be working with my friends' patterns, and especially Charisma Horton, who is a genius at these block of the month designs. And I don't want to, I guess I should maybe tell you a little bit of a spoiler alert. A couple of the months aren't very much work. They're kind of like our catch-up months where we can get caught up, and some of the blocks are really fun and easy where the random fabrics just come together. And so it's like grab bag style quilting all over again. Today we're going to be a little bit more accurate as we work with these template pieces and things. So there's a whole variety of stitching as we go along. Now, what we're going to also need to do, now that we've done that, is we're going to need to mark that diagonal line one more time on the back of our squares. And now I'm just doing that to the ones that have the dark green companion with the dark blue companion. Okay? We're going to use those as seam allowance lines again, but now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and rotate these together so that when I put them on here, and this is what I'm doing, I've got my green here and my green here, so technically opposite sides. And your check, folks, is when you pull it back on that drawn line you just did, what you want to see is the matching green fabrics, or the matching similar fabrics, I should say, the new add-in fabric, and then that blue that we're going to see throughout the rest of all of these blocks here in month 1. Okay, so that's the check you're looking for. Make sure you have that seams running there. And I like to go ahead and prep them all. And the nice thing is now, this is why we all press to the green fabric, is I'm also wiggling together, nesting those seams. If you haven't done many quilts, folks, these block of the months can be great ways to learn. And I'm just going to try to point out as many of our little common quilting tips that we have as we go along. You'll notice we didn't do any trimming either. We just separated these and got them ready to go. Okay, just double checking again that I've got everything going, because I'm talking a little bit too much while prepping it out. Now we're back over to the sewing machine, and we're going to go ahead and and we can chain piece these again, folks. Just using that presser foot right along that seam line. Just watching your underseam, if anything, making sure all your fabrics are where they're supposed to be as you're starting out. Once you have those sides, of course, just like before, we're going to rotate them and do the other sides. And you're doing this to all of those units you have prepared in your cutting info. Once those are all done, go ahead and just like before, let's go ahead and separate these using a rotary cutter and ruler, making sure nothing got folded under. Mostly the ruler here is to protect our hands. It's always a good habit. use both the cutter and the ruler together. And now we're going to go ahead and just press these out, and we should end up with 4 identical units from each of our color groupings. Now, I can tell you these units should finish at 4.5, and every other square within this 9 patch you're building also needs to finish at 4.5 to stay somewhat accurate. So there's kind of a trick I want to share with you here. Because we're dealing with the quarter square triangle, I can almost guarantee you mine's not a perfect 4.5 all the way around because we didn't pre-trim. So I'm going to take now my 45-degree angle on my ruler, and first I'm finding that diagonal down the diagonal seam, right? I'm going to find it down one of my major seams here. And now I'm going to adjust so that my 2.25 mark is right at the dead center, and I'm also looking down here past my 4.5 mark, and I can see that I have excess. So now, very simply, what I can do is I can go ahead and just shave off an edge here. Sometimes I like to pull backwards on these cuts because it's just a fine little cut, okay? And then I'm thinking to myself, with all of these, I would normally pull out that Martelli mat I have here, and I would take the time to trim them all down. So then that way, because this was seated this way, I can rotate it 180 degrees. And then now I'm going to just find real simply my 4.5 mark. I say simply, and I'm focused on making sure I get it right. So again, that diagonal is running through here. Now I'm at 4.5 and I'm at 4.5. And now I can come up here again and I can trim that first edge. And now even a little bit easier because of that rotation, I can trim that second edge. And now all of these units like this are going to be perfect 4.5s. And I can tell you when I look at my sample pieces here, I believe I've already trimmed them down. Yes, I have, because you can see most of the corners are missing. So again, what we're going to do now is we'll just go ahead and shift into a new colorway because these have been trimmed, and I'll take the time later to trim all of those during the rest of my month because I love doing my block of the month projects so that I have something to be kind of sewing on consistently. This is that thing I keep in my bin over to the side. So when I'm done with my daily sewing work, which is, yes, I'm blessed to sew for a living, then I come back to the projects I'm super excited about, the ongoing projects. And so that's how I'm treating this. So I will treat those later, and I'm going to treat all of us to finishing out this video here now. Let's go ahead, as I said, like we're just going to swap into the colors here for this next round. And we also, again, have 4 of those that are all matching. With me? Awesome. Okay. Now, let's bounce in. We're moving on to the next page of block number 1. This is what we've just completed up here. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to take our medium squares, because these are kind of our small squares. These are going to be cut diagonally, and we're going to sew them onto the template. So let's slow down one more last time here and talk about this template. So this template here is provided with your pattern, and you're going to want to cut it out with the dotted line. Okay, and one of the things you want to make sure you're doing if you're printing your own pages is make sure that everything's set properly. So I'm measuring my test square to make sure it's 1 inch. This is something you see in almost all download patterns. So if you've downloaded your own pattern, make sure that you are measuring it 1 inch so that we can go ahead and cut these templates. Now for me, what I have found, it's very nice and easy to take the strips that were recommended from our cutting instructions, and now I'm going to use my template in bulk, in stacks, so that I'm cutting them as many as possible at once and as accurately as possible at once. So I'm just going to take myself a moment because I've been playing with these and really readjust, making sure everything's right on the edge as I want it. Okay, this happens to be my folded from my strips down there earlier. Now what's going to happen is I'm going to lay this on here. Okay, and now I'm also still going to go ahead and use my template or my cutter to keep my hand safe. Okay, so the first thing, that'll also start to set the diagonal angle for your next piece, so that's appropriate to cut all the way through there. You can see here if you start to fight it a little bit and you want to get a little wild, you can. Just be real nice and careful, and you're cutting paper. So more of a roll and rock motion like this, okay, because we want to honor those tips. I like to use the template when possible, but I've gotten a little carried away here. So yes, you can tell that it is pretty dang easy to stay pretty accurate still, just doing it this way. And if you've never seen one of my videos before, I should have let you know I'm a bit of a slob when it really comes down to it. Team Rob is Team Slob in the quilting world, apparently, and I think that's just lovely. So at any rate, I've prepared these pieces here. Now, lots of them, as you can see. We're gonna make these pieces, and we're gonna need 1, 2, 3, 4 of them as well for each of our block units that we're making for the block of the month. Okay, so you can see I was also already chain piecing these. So as I was mentioning earlier, we do need to cut these units on the diagonal. I'm going to adjust my cutter to heavy cutting because I have several squares there. Okay, perfect, love that. Now, one of our keys to these, I'll show you one of them, and then we can just go ahead and finish out those chain piecing, is to take this unit here, and we're going to lay it so we kind of can see our equal amounts of the corners hanging through from the blue fabric. Okay, so it's a roughly 1/4 inch popping through right there, actually. And then once you have that on that first line, because you've accounted for your seam allowance, now you may even want to use, because we've already done our diagonal sewings, you might want to use an edge guide and a marker to make sure, and I did just put a video out on Stitch in Heaven's webpage about doing a perfect 1/4 inch marker. Pretty fun. But now this will allow you, and like I said, you can go ahead and grab and chain piece all of these because you have 4 per block and we have lots of blocks to make. And once they're chain pieced, they're going to pop out like this, and then I'm just going to cut them straight off the cutter. Okay, and at this point now, I actually want to try to press into the blue fabric, just so that the white fabric doesn't get that bleed through showing. So I'm going to hold that blue corner up in the air, and I'm going to press it over. And I really like to do this step before I attempt to sew on the other piece, because even though the threads won't cross, this is just going to help everything stay nice and accurate as we go. Once these pieces have been put on, now we're going to go ahead and grab our other triangles, cut away, and it's going to be the same kind of overlap. But one of the things I'd like to point out I'm looking at now is this point and this point. If they line up, they're going to be most accurate when they're all done. So now I go right back over to that same 1/4 inch. Everything's still set up with that edge guide on there for me. And now also on the other halves of these blocks that were created with our paper templates. Okay, pretty dang easy. And I can see that I've already got the 4 prepped out for today's video. So let me press that other one over and show you, and then we can dive into our center unit. So same thing, I'm going to hold the blue fabric in the air. I'm going to press over. And I'll also make sure that these get trimmed down to the 4.5 inches so that they're ready to roll so we can build out all of our pieces. Okay? Now we're going to move into our center unit, and this is really easy fun, folks. And I kind of thought we should have started here, but I guess Charisma likes us to be able to have our dessert at the end instead of first, like I think it should be. So at any rate, now we're going to build the small unit. Again, it's going to measure at 4.5 when it's all finished, and it's going to simply use your smallest of the squares for today's math. And you're going to take 2 of those rectangles here, and we're going to sew them on to each side. So let's do that together now. And with something like this, folks, I'm actually literally going to do them all by just grabbing each side. It's just as easy. Of course, we could be chain piecing as well, both sides. It's a very simple process. And again, I'm going to press into the center black by holding and putting the iron on the white or the light fabric first. And again on that opposite side. We've also cut some longer strips that are rectangular shaped here. So these will adjust into this like that. You know you've done it correctly when the edges line up perfect, and that's so nice. And that also is kind of a testament that your seam allowance is set up good. And that's going to really help you throughout the rest of this project. I found recently by having the seam tape and the edge guide working together, it allows me to move that edge guide on and off my machine with ease and come back to a very accurate setup. I'm really enjoying this new found knowledge I have here. Again, we're not crossing our thread, so I can sew on both pieces at once. You're probably chain piecing all of these as well. We're going to press away from, we're going to press towards center, starting with the iron on the light fabric. And this again is just to keep the majority of the appearance tidy. Sometimes you have to get your fingers under here like this to help a little bit. It's a lot of bulk. Now getting pressed towards that middle square. It can handle it. It can handle it. Okay, now we're ready to build out. It's just that simple, right? Super fun. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to take this, we're going to take some of our units like you can see, and we're just going to focus on having the single color touch to the black-white center, putting the background, that dark blue I kept referring to, on the outer side like that. Making sense, right? Now we're going to run our diagonal blocks from the center out. So these will just set in here like this. And now, folks, it becomes a standardized 9 patch where we just need to pay attention to our directions, as I say it, and we're going to sew these together. So I'm going to join this row, then this row, then this row, and I'm going to do that right now. One of the nice things about this first block is just you can kind of notice you're constantly sewing that unique color to the white fabrics where they touch in the points and things. Just kind of be looking for that. That center right now, I'm looking at the red touching the whites in a lot of places. So yes, I generally like to get my rows sewed together so I can spot check, and then there's one last ironing trick. So because we can still nest these center units or the seam allowance units here, what I like to do as a tradition when it comes to a 9 patch, on the outside rows, I press to the outside or away from center. So literally I'm going to push up here, pull up and over. So I'm pushing away from the center on my seam allowances, on what will be the bottom and the top rows. So outside edges, I'm pressing to the outside, and that means on the center, I'm going to be pressing towards the center. That's how I've kind of taught myself to remember it over the years. And I like that because it does really help us have one more place for accuracy of lining up our stitch points. So again, just pressing into the middle here. Now I can go ahead because it's universal, even though you did see that rotate. Now I'm going to line up the edge and these points as I go. And there we have it, folks, our very first month finished together. Well, at least the instructions for the block. I'm going to kind of just press towards the center now, and I'm going to ask you all to don't let yourselves fall behind. Spend the rest of the next few weeks getting yourselves completely sewn through all of your different colors. You're going to have 3 of these stars in each, you're going to have 4 of these stars, 1 for each of the corners. So you've got some fun, easy sewing to do in this first month. Not a ton to do. and it's going to be awesome. Make sure you just stay with your color coding for your instructions. And I should point out, near your template, you also have this wonderful series right here where it shows you all of the exact colors you're going for. So there's the one on the wall here. Here's number 2. We were starting to make this color, and I've got the last right there to go together. So hopefully that helps you. And I'm so excited to see you next month as we tackle month number 2 on this epic quilt by Charisma Horton. Thanks again, folks. We'll see you next time.